The stars of the distant galaxy shimmered like scattered diamonds across the black sky, each one holding a story untold, a secret waiting to be discovered. Among these countless worlds, one small planet had caught the attention of the Council of Worlds, an assembly of civilizations that had long mastered the art of cooperation. The planet was far from thriving. Its rivers had begun to dry, its forests were fragile and thin, and the creatures that once roamed freely now moved cautiously, unsure of their survival. Its people, or what was left of them, sent signals into the void, pleas for help, prayers for saviors who could restore what had been lost. They hoped for beings of wisdom and light, beings who could act like angels in the night. When the Council broadcasted the request across the galaxy, expecting responses from serene and ancient species, a strange answer arrived from the edge of the spiral arms: humans. No one had really known much about humans, not like they knew about the other civilizations in the galaxy. Humans were small in number, young in history, and had a reputation for being unpredictable. Yet they had something unique, something that even the oldest civilizations could not claim. They were daring, inventive, and full of unexpected solutions. A fleet of human ships appeared near the troubled planet like strange, living shadows, gliding silently across the atmosphere. These ships were unlike anything the Council had ever seen. They were not elegant and soft in design, like the ships of the Thrians, or radiant like the Solari vessels. Human ships were functional but bold, with lines that reminded one of creatures rather than machines. And when the humans emerged, they did not step out as delicate diplomats in robes of ceremonial white. They stepped out wearing massive suits that made them look larger than life, suits that resembled mythical monsters of their own planet, tall, gleaming, strange. With broad shoulders, elongated limbs, and glowing eyes set into masks shaped like animal faces, they seemed to tower above the small alien crowd that had gathered. The aliens were silent, a gentle murmur of confusion spreading among them. Some whispered to each other, unsure whether these humans were joking, foolish, or dangerous. The creatures of the planet had never seen beings like this. One of the council members, a soft-bodied being with translucent skin, floated closer and tried to greet the newcomers. "Are you the saviors we asked for?" it asked, its voice gentle, trembling with curiosity. The humans smiled behind their masks, not at all bothered by the aliens' confusion. One of them, the one who seemed to be the leader, stepped forward with a confident, fluid motion. His voice carried clearly, amplified by a soft device in his suit. "We are here to help," he said. "We are human, and though we may not look like what you expected, we promise we are friends. We bring solutions to your problems." But as they watched, they saw humans begin to move with surprising grace. The monster suits were not heavy or clumsy. They bent, stretched, and flexed as if alive, controlled by humans' precise movements inside. They were intimidating at first sight, yet the humans inside them carried no weapons, no threats, only tools designed to heal and rebuild. The first thing the humans did was survey the planet's forests. Using drones, sensors, and the strength of their suits, they began to map the entire land. The trees that were nearly dead seemed to respond, as if the humans' presence gave them encouragement. Tiny green buds appeared where there had been only brown branches. Rivers that had slowed to a trickle began to shimmer and shine again as the humans released small, harmless devices that cleaned and purified water. Each movement of the humans was deliberate, careful, and yet daring. They moved faster than anyone expected, weaving through the terrain like creatures that belonged to both the land and the sky. The aliens watched, still unsure of what to make of this. One of them floated close to the humans, curious. "Why do you act like this?" it asked. "Why wear these suits? Why appear monstrous?" "We take forms that give us strength and reach. But our hearts are human. We care. We are here to help." They moved with care among the rivers, gently scooping polluted water into machines that purified it. They worked with the plants, adding nutrients in ways the aliens could barely imagine. They even approached the native creatures of the planet, small and timid, and taught them, without words, to trust again. It was astonishing. The humans' approach was not just about fixing problems. They taught, guided, and encouraged. Where the planet's own life had grown weary and fearful, the humans brought energy and confidence. Slowly, the aliens began to notice the change. The air itself seemed lighter. Flowers that had refused to bloom for months opened in soft colors. Birds that had hidden in fear now flew openly. And through it all, the humans moved like gentle giants, careful not to harm, careful not to dominate. They were powerful, yes, but their power was not for themselves. It was for the planet, for all who lived upon it. The council held a meeting to discuss the humans. Some members were still hesitant. "They are strange," one said, its voice trembling. "We do not understand them. What if their strength harms the delicate systems of the planet? Look at what they have done in a single day." They approached cities that were crumbling, offering guidance on how to rebuild using techniques that were new to the planet but sustainable and safe. Every action was a lesson, every movement a demonstration of ingenuity. The aliens, once wary, now began to follow. They watched the humans carefully, mimicking their methods, learning to adapt. Children of the planet were especially fascinated. They ran alongside the massive suits, laughing as they played in the soft glow of the humans' tools. The humans paused to smile, to show the children how to plant seeds, how to nurture the smallest creatures, and how to create balance between technology and nature. In these moments, the monstrous appearance of the humans no longer frightened anyone. It became something magical, something inspiring. As the day turned into night, the humans gathered near a river that had been nearly dry before their arrival. Its waters now shimmered with life, reflecting the stars above. One human knelt beside the water and dipped a hand into it, then touched a nearby sapling, whispering encouragement. The aliens who had gathered watched in silence. For a moment, no words were needed. The humans' actions spoke louder than any speech could. Their care, their thoughtfulness, their courage to be different, all of it showed that these were indeed the saviors the planet had asked for, even if no one had imagined them looking like this. The leader of the humans finally addressed the council again, his voice calm and steady. "We are not angels," he said. "We do not promise perfection, but we promise effort, intelligence, and care. We will work with you, teach you, and learn from you. Together we can restore this world. You asked for saviors, and perhaps by your standards we are monsters, but we are your monsters here to help." The humans were different, strange, even intimidating in appearance, but they were remarkable in spirit. They were clever, brave, and patient. They were exactly what the planet needed. And slowly the council members realized that perhaps it did not matter how saviors looked, only that they had the heart to care deeply and the courage to act. As the first part of the day ended, the humans prepared their tools for the coming work, quietly communicating with one another through subtle gestures and soft lights on their suits. They were focused, ready, and unwavering. The aliens watched, filled with curiosity and a growing sense of admiration. The planet, which had seemed so fragile, already felt stronger, as if it had been given new life by the mere presence of these unusual creatures. The night sky stretched over the land, full of promise. Somewhere among the stars, more civilizations waited, unaware that humanity, with all its strangeness, had begun a story that would be remembered across galaxies. They were bold, they were different, and they were ready. The aliens no longer saw monsters. They saw hope, unexpected and extraordinary. The morning sun stretched across the planet, spilling golden light over forests, rivers, and mountains that had begun to awaken under humanity's care. The air was fresher, carrying scents of damp soil, blooming flowers, and the faint tang of the purified rivers. The aliens who had gathered the previous day moved through the transformed landscapes with a mix of wonder and caution. They had begun to trust the humans, but trust had to grow slowly, for their minds were not used to being so strange and so bold. The humans, however, worked without hesitation. Their suits glimmered in the sunlight, each movement precise and purposeful. They did not need rest like the planet's creatures, or at least they seemed that way. Some humans worked in pairs, moving like living machines, their suits adapting to the terrain, lifting fallen trees with care, releasing seeds into the ground, or guiding rivers to flow naturally without flooding the lands. Others approached the struggling creatures of the planet. Small mammals, birds, and insects, once timid and cautious, now approached the humans, sensing the safety in their presence. One human knelt near a group of tiny creatures hiding under a large leaf. She extended her hand, not to touch or scare them, but to show them that the humans meant no harm. Slowly, hesitantly, the creatures crept forward, nibbling at the seeds she offered. Her eyes shone behind the mask, filled with gentle warmth. "There you go," she said softly, speaking in a language that the aliens could not understand but somehow felt. Her voice carried kindness that transcended words. The aliens watched, realizing that humans did not need to speak their language to communicate love and care. Meanwhile, the Planetary Council began to send their own teams to observe and assist the humans. Initially, they had kept their distance, unsure whether these strange beings could truly help. Now, curiosity overcame hesitation. One alien, a floating being with multiple eyes and translucent wings, hovered near a human working at the riverbank. "Why do you work so quickly?" it asked. "Do you not tire? Do you not fear mistakes?" In their civilization, problems were usually solved with caution and long deliberation. A single mistake could lead to disaster, or so they had been told. Humans, on the other hand, seemed to treat mistakes as teachers, each one offering a new lesson. The alien began to understand that this energy, this willingness to try and to risk, was part of why humans were extraordinary. The humans divided their tasks, each group moving to a different part of the planet. One team approached the deserts, which had been cracked and dry for decades. They planted tiny pods that expanded slowly into plants, using the heat and sun to their advantage. Another team climbed the mountains, reinforcing fragile cliffs and redirecting rainwater to nourish lower lands. Their suits allowed them to carry more than any native creature, but they moved carefully, ensuring that nothing was damaged in the process. As they worked, they began to interact with the children of the planet, small beings who had spent most of their lives in fear of the dying environment. The children ran alongside the humans, mimicking their movements, learning to plant seeds and even helping to carry small tools. The humans encouraged them, teaching through action rather than words. By the end of the morning, the children had learned more about their own land than they had in years of schooling, understanding how every plant, every stream, and every creature was connected. It was not just the land that humans changed, but the spirits of the inhabitants. Parents who had been cautious and anxious began to smile as they saw their children running freely and happily. Birds that had hidden in trees sang more boldly. Small mammals ventured out of hiding. The energy of the planet itself seemed to respond to humans' presence, as if life had been waiting for someone daring enough to care in unusual ways. The council began to discuss the humans again. "Perhaps we were wrong to doubt them," said one member. "They are not like us. They do not move with the same caution, yet they achieve results we could not have imagined." Another responded, "Their methods are strange, even reckless by our standards, but their understanding of the world is profound. They see connections that we miss. Perhaps this is why they can heal what we could not." Some began to assist the humans directly, offering tools and insights from their own technologies. The humans received their help gratefully, combining alien technology with their own methods in ways that were creative and unexpected. A river that had been clogged with debris was cleared quickly, using a combination of floating drones and plant-based filtration systems. In the mountains, landslides were prevented by reinforcing soil with natural fibers and carefully positioned structures that allowed water to flow safely. As the day wore on, the humans began to teach the aliens more than just techniques. They demonstrated the importance of observation, patience, and creativity. "Do not just act," one human said, kneeling beside a young alien. "Watch carefully. Notice patterns. The world speaks to you if you listen." The alien tilted its head, absorbing the lesson. Slowly, it began to understand that the humans' power did not come from their suits or tools alone, but from their minds, their attention, and their ability to imagine possibilities where others could see only problems. By afternoon, clouds began to gather over the mountains, and the first light rain of the season began to fall. The humans did not panic. Instead, they used the rain to their advantage. They had planted seeds that absorbed water, creating channels for excess to flow into rivers without flooding villages. They guided creatures to safer areas, all while showing the aliens how to manage the rain with balance and care. Even in unexpected conditions, the humans adapted, never forcing, never demanding, only guiding and responding. At one point, a curious alien approached a human working near a steep cliff. "Do you not fear falling?" it asked, its voice trembling slightly. "This is dangerous work. You only need to see it as it is, not as you fear it might be." And the alien, observing this, felt a small shift in its own understanding of what it meant to be a caretaker of the planet. By evening, the humans gathered near the largest city, a place that had been nearly abandoned due to its crumbling structures and scarcity of water. They called the aliens to watch as they demonstrated a process of restoration. They did not simply rebuild buildings. They taught the city's inhabitants to repair, strengthen, and improve using materials already available. Slowly, the city began to feel alive again. The streets were filled with movement, laughter, and hope. The humans moved among the inhabitants like gentle giants, offering guidance without taking over. A small child tugged at one human's sleeve, pointing to a patch of dead flowers. The human knelt and held the child's hand. Together, they sprinkled new seeds and pressed them gently into the soil. The human spoke softly. "These will grow. You will care for them, and they will remind you that life can return if we nurture it." The child's eyes shone with wonder, and the aliens around them felt something shift deep inside. Perhaps the humans' true power was not in their suits, their machines, or even their clever techniques. It was in their ability to inspire others to act, to care, and to believe. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the landscape, the humans paused to observe the day's work. The forests were greener, rivers flowed clearer, animals moved with less fear, and the people of the planet began to smile again. They were not perfect, nor was the work finished, but the transformation was undeniable. The humans, towering in their monstrous suits, looked over the land with quiet satisfaction. They had not forced change. They had guided it, nurtured it, and encouraged it to grow naturally. The council, observing from afar, could not help but feel awe. They had expected angelic saviors, beings of serene wisdom who would move delicately and cautiously. Instead, they had received humans, bold, strange, audacious, and entirely unpredictable. And yet these monsters were proving to be exactly what the planet needed. The council began to whisper among themselves that perhaps they had underestimated humanity, as so many civilizations had before. Night fell, and the stars shone down on the healed portions of the planet. The humans remained active, checking instruments, planning the next day's work, and speaking softly to each other through gestures and signals. They were patient, persistent, and endlessly creative. The aliens who had worked beside them could not hide their admiration, and even those who had doubted humanity now saw them in a new light. By the end of the second day, it was clear that the humans were not just helpers. They were teachers, guides, and innovators. They had taken a world on the brink of despair and shown it the first signs of hope. And while the aliens had asked for saviors, what they had received was something far greater. Beings who could see possibilities where others saw only limits, and who could inspire a planet to rise again through care, ingenuity, and courage. The humans, strange and towering as they were, had begun a story that would be remembered by the inhabitants of this planet forever. They were monsters, perhaps, but they were monsters who could heal, teach, and inspire. And as the planet slept under the starlit sky, the humans prepared for another day, ready to bring more life, more learning, and more hope to a world that had begun to believe once again in the impossible. The days passed, and the planet continued to change under the humans' careful guidance. Forests that had seemed fragile and thin now swayed with a gentle strength in the wind. Rivers that had been sluggish and muddy ran clear and bright, and small creatures moved with renewed confidence across the land. Even the sky seemed sharper and clearer, as if the humans' work had given the air itself a new energy. The aliens, once hesitant and doubtful, now moved freely alongside the humans, eager to learn but still cautious. The humans had begun to notice something the aliens had not. The planet, though responding to their care, was not entirely stable. Some of the ecosystems were so weakened that they struggled to adapt to sudden changes. In one valley, a grove of trees refused to grow even though the soil had been nourished. In another, streams would occasionally dry for hours, leaving fish and small mammals confused and anxious. The humans studied these anomalies carefully. They did not panic. Instead, they moved methodically, observing patterns, experimenting, and adjusting their methods. They approached every problem as a puzzle to solve, not a disaster to fear. One human, kneeling beside a stream that had suddenly receded, studied the rocks and plants. "It is not enough to restore the soil," she said softly, speaking more to herself than to the aliens nearby. "We must understand how the water moves, how the sun warms it, how the life depends on its rhythm. Only then can we help completely." She motioned to a small alien observer, guiding its gaze to subtle changes in the stream. The alien's many eyes followed the human's hand, slowly beginning to notice what had gone unseen before. Patterns in the movement of water, connections between the smallest plants and the flow of the river, and the delicate balance that had been broken. Elsewhere, another team of humans worked in the mountains. They had discovered that certain slopes were too steep for normal growth, and even small plants would not take root. Instead of forcing changes, they used lightweight nets and supports made of local materials to guide roots along safe paths. Slowly, small shrubs began to anchor themselves, holding the soil in place and preventing erosion. The aliens who watched were amazed. "We would have cleared these slopes completely," one said, "but you found a way to let nature do its work safely and without destroying it." The human smiled. "We are not trying to control nature," he said. We are learning to work with it. One afternoon, as a group of humans released a cloud of moisture into a desert area, they noticed that some native plants reacted unpredictably. Certain flowers wilted instead of blooming. The humans quickly adjusted, using small tools to measure soil composition and temperature and reposition the moisture cloud. Slowly, the plants revived, but the aliens who had gathered looked worried. "Is this failure?" one asked. The human shook her head gently. "No," she said. "This is learning. Sometimes we make a step that does not work perfectly, but each step teaches us something new. We adapt and we try again. That is how life survives." The aliens exchanged glances. They were beginning to see that humans did not fear mistakes, and perhaps that was what made them extraordinary. Children of the planet continued to follow the humans everywhere. They laughed and ran, copying the humans' movements, learning to plant, water, and nurture. Sometimes they failed, and seeds did not take root, but the humans encouraged them gently. "It is okay," one said, crouching beside a child whose plant had wilted. "Try again. See what happens if you water it a little differently or give it more sunlight. Observe, learn, and adjust. That is how we help the world grow." The child's face lit up with understanding, and even the alien observers felt a small spark of excitement at this lesson. Meanwhile, the humans began to notice subtle changes in the behavior of the planet's larger creatures. Birds that had been shy now sang boldly, but some were starting to move differently than expected. Small mammals ventured into areas they had avoided, and some insects began to interact with the plants in ways humans had not predicted. Instead of panicking, the humans welcomed these changes as part of the natural process. They moved carefully to observe, to understand, and to guide without forcing. Every adjustment was thoughtful, based on observation and knowledge, not fear. One day, a small group of humans traveled to a valley where a stream had nearly dried. They found tiny fish struggling in shallow pools, gasping for oxygen. A human gently scooped some of the fish into portable water containers and guided them downstream, releasing them in deeper pools. At the same time, they carefully adjusted the stream's course, allowing water to flow evenly across the valley. Aliens watched in awe, realizing that the humans' care extended not just to plants and land, but to every living being. "They do not just fix problems," one whispered. "They understand life itself." Even the sky appeared brighter, with clouds moving in gentle patterns, as if the weather itself had become more predictable under the humans' influence. The aliens began to whisper to one another that perhaps these beings were not monsters at all. Perhaps their strange appearance was simply a reflection of their boldness, their willingness to act, and their creativity. The council held another meeting to discuss the humans' progress. "They are doing more than we expected," one member said. "Their methods are unconventional, yes, but they are effective. They teach, they observe, and they adapt. They do not dominate, they guide. And the planet is responding." Another added, "Their energy, their courage, and their willingness to face uncertainty, it is something we have never seen before. They may be young as a species, but they are remarkable." They taught the aliens how to observe, how to adjust, and how to act without forcing the natural order. They showed that patience, intelligence, and creativity were as powerful as strength, and that courage did not mean acting without care, but acting wisely in the face of uncertainty. At one point, a storm began to gather over the mountains. The wind picked up and clouds darkened the sky. The aliens panicked slightly, unsure if their fragile world could withstand the coming weather. The humans, however, moved calmly. They guided animals to safe areas, reinforced vulnerable slopes, and adjusted the flow of water to prevent flooding. They moved through the storm like dancers, their suits adapting to the wind and rain. The aliens watched in silence, realizing that fear did not guide these humans, knowledge, care, and courage did. As the storm passed, the humans surveyed the land. Some trees had bent under the wind, but none had broken. Streams had shifted, but no creatures had been harmed. Even the clouds seemed to part with a softness that mirrored the humans' gentle guidance. The aliens whispered among themselves, amazed that these strange, towering beings could influence a storm without forcing it, without domination, but simply by understanding and working with the planet. Evening came, and the humans gathered once more near the largest city. The streets, once empty and gray, were now alive with color and movement. Children ran freely, carrying plants and tools, helping to rebuild small structures. Parents watched proudly, smiling for the first time in years. The aliens moved quietly among them, learning from both humans and children. The humans knelt to show the smallest inhabitants how to care for a plant, how to repair a broken wall, and how to work together. Every action was a lesson, every gesture a demonstration of hope. The leader of the humans addressed the council once more, his voice calm and steady. "The world is not broken beyond repair," he said. "It has weaknesses, yes, but it also has strength. Our work is not to force change, but to guide it. We adapt, we observe, and we care. That is what allows life to grow again." The aliens, listening, began to understand something important. Humans were not simply saviors. They were teachers, guides, and innovators. Their boldness, their creativity, and their willingness to embrace uncertainty were qualities that no other species had. Night fell, and the stars shone brightly over the restored parts of the planet. The humans remained active, preparing for the next day's work, speaking softly to one another through gestures and subtle lights on their suits. The aliens observed, filled with admiration and a growing sense of wonder. They began to realize that the humans' monstrous appearance was not frightening. It was a symbol of their boldness, their willingness to act where others hesitated, and their capacity to see possibilities that no one else could. By the end of the third day, it was clear that the humans had become more than helpers. They were catalysts, sparking change, growth, and hope in every corner of the planet. The Council and the aliens alike began to whisper that these strange beings were not just saviors. They were extraordinary beings who could inspire life itself to rise again. And as the humans prepared for another day of careful work, the planet seemed to hum with life, as if it had recognized its true guardians. For the first time in decades, the planet's inhabitants could sleep without fear, knowing that creatures of courage, wisdom, and care watched over them. The humans, tall, strange, and remarkable, had shown that even in a world full of challenges, hope could grow, patience could guide, and creativity could transform the impossible into reality. The planet was healing, and with every step, humans proved that true strength was not in appearance, but in the heart, the mind, and the courage to act wisely in the face of uncertainty. The planet had begun to breathe more freely. Forests stretched taller, rivers sparkled, and creatures moved with a cautious curiosity rather than fear. The humans, towering and strange in their suits, moved through the land with confidence and care, teaching, guiding, and observing every step of the way. Yet, even with their knowledge and creativity, they knew that the planet still held challenges that no one could ignore. One morning, as sunlight spilled over the mountains, the humans noticed a change in the sky. A massive storm was forming over the northern regions, larger and faster than any weather patterns the aliens had ever seen. Winds howled, clouds churned, and rain began to fall in sheets. Streams that had flowed steadily all year began to swell, threatening to flood the valleys below. Even some of the strengthened forests seemed vulnerable, and the creatures of the planet retreated in panic. The aliens gathered in fear. "This storm, it is too strong," one said, voice trembling. "It will destroy everything. We cannot stop it." Others murmured in agreement, feeling helpless against the overwhelming force of nature. For decades, they had seen storms like this, but they had never faced one that threatened the balance of life so completely. The humans did not hesitate. They had seen storms before, too, not on this planet, but on others. They understood patterns, balance, and adaptation. They moved quickly but carefully, coordinating with one another through subtle gestures and lights on their suits. "We can help," one human said calmly. "We will guide the water, protect the land, and safeguard the creatures. Everyone can help if we work together." The humans' monster-like suits allowed them to carry materials, reinforce banks, and move swiftly in the harsh conditions. Yet they moved gently, never forcing the streams or scaring the animals. In the mountains, humans climbed slopes that would have been impossible for the alien teams. They secured rocks, guided rainwater along safe paths, and reinforced fragile cliffs with natural supports. Each action was measured and deliberate. "Do not fight the storm," one human explained to a young alien observer. "The storm is part of the system. We work with it, not against it. If we guide it carefully, it can pass without causing harm." Birds nested in safer trees, small mammals were guided to dry areas, and aquatic life was gently moved to pools with stable water levels. Children of the planet, encouraged by the humans, helped by carrying small plants and tools to stabilize soil and redirect water. Even the most timid adults began to act, inspired by the humans' courage and calmness. As the storm grew stronger, lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the humans' towering suits. They moved like guardians of the land, each action precise and careful. One human used a reflective shield to direct sunlight toward a fragile patch of plants, preventing them from being overwatered. Another coordinated with a team to redirect a swollen stream just in time to protect a small village. The aliens watched in awe. The humans were not just strong, they were clever, adaptive, and fearless in their problem-solving. At one point, a massive gust of wind threatened to knock over a young tree the humans had planted days ago. A human dove forward, adjusting a support and gently holding the tree upright until the wind passed. "It is okay," he said softly. "We cannot stop the wind, but we can guide it, protect life, and adapt." That is how balance is restored. The aliens began to understand that the humans' true power was not in their size or their tools, but in their knowledge, patience, and ability to respond calmly to danger. The storm raged for hours. Rain fell in torrents, lightning struck distant mountains, and winds threatened to uproot fragile ecosystems. Yet everywhere the humans worked, life endured. Forests held together, rivers flowed within safe channels, and creatures survived unharmed. The aliens, who had once believed the planet might collapse, now saw that hope remained. They followed the humans' guidance, learning to act with intelligence and care instead of fear. As night approached, the storm began to move past the northern regions. Clouds thinned, winds slowed, and raindrops softened to gentle showers. The humans moved through the landscape, checking every area they had worked on, ensuring that every stream, tree, and creature was safe. The aliens helped, carrying tools, repositioning plants, and assisting the humans in ways they had never imagined they could. By the time the stars appeared, the planet looked remarkably intact, considering the storm it had just endured. The council convened again, this time with a sense of awe rather than fear. "We expected humans to help restore the planet, yes," one member said, "but we did not expect them to face a storm like this and succeed. They are remarkable. They are not just saviors, they are teachers, guides, and protectors." Another added, "They are not gentle in appearance, but their actions are. Perhaps we have underestimated what it means to care for a world." Instead, they continued their work, repairing minor damage caused by the storm, guiding animals back to their habitats, and checking water flows to ensure nothing was left unstable. They moved patiently, calmly, and tirelessly, showing the aliens that true care required not only action but persistence. A young alien approached one of the human leaders, eyes wide with admiration. "You are not afraid of the storm," it said. "How can you remain so calm?" "Fear is natural, but courage is choosing to act with knowledge and care, even when the world seems wild." The alien nodded slowly, beginning to understand that humans did not see challenges as threats. They saw them as opportunities to learn, adapt, and protect life. By morning, the planet had begun to recover fully from the storm. Trees that had bent were upright again, streams flowed smoothly, and animals moved through the land as if nothing had happened. The humans continued their careful guidance, adjusting minor changes and ensuring stability. They demonstrated to the aliens how to observe subtle shifts in weather, soil, and water, teaching them that attention and intelligence were as important as strength. The children of the planet watched the humans with wonder, mimicking their careful movements, planting seeds and guiding water along small channels. The adults, too, had begun to change. They learned to act without panic, to observe without rushing, and to work with the world rather than against it. Slowly, the aliens began to feel a sense of confidence they had not known for generations. The humans were teaching not just care, but resilience. In the city, the humans demonstrated how to protect buildings from rain and wind without using heavy construction. They taught the inhabitants to use lightweight supports and natural materials, showing that structures could be strong yet flexible, blending with the environment rather than fighting it. The aliens marveled at the ingenuity, realizing that humans combined creativity with courage in ways that no other species had mastered. By afternoon, the storm was entirely gone. Sunlight returned, glimmering on rivers, shining through forests, and illuminating the mountains. Birds sang freely, small mammals moved confidently, and the planet seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. The humans gathered to review their work, quietly communicating with each other through gestures and subtle lights on their suits. The aliens joined them, eager to learn and contribute. The council observed from a distance, unable to hide their admiration. "They faced the storm and guided life safely through it," one member said. "They are not what we expected, they are more. Their boldness, creativity, and patience, it is extraordinary." Another member added, "Perhaps we have underestimated humanity. They are not angels, they are something entirely new, something that inspires hope through action, not appearance." Their suits glimmered in the fading light, monstrous in appearance but gentle in purpose. The planet was alive again, resilient and stronger than it had been before the storm. The aliens gathered nearby, looking at the humans with awe, admiration, and respect. For the first time, many realized that the true power of a savior was not in calm appearances or serene wisdom, but in the courage to act, the intelligence to adapt, and the patience to guide life gently, even in the face of overwhelming challenges. The humans, towering and strange, had faced the planet's greatest test so far and succeeded. They had protected life, restored balance, and taught the inhabitants to act with care and creativity. And as night fell over the rejuvenated world, the stars twinkling above, it was clear that humanity had become more than saviors. They had become a symbol of hope, courage, and the extraordinary possibilities that come from combining intelligence, empathy, and bold action. The morning air was crisp and clear. The storm had passed, leaving the planet refreshed, alive, and brimming with energy. The rivers ran smoothly, forests swayed with renewed strength, and the creatures of the land moved with curiosity and confidence. The humans, towering in their strange suits, moved calmly through the world, preparing for their next tasks. But unlike previous days, today felt different. The planet itself seemed to pause and watch. The Council of Worlds, observing from afar, had gathered for a final review. They had expected wise and gentle saviors, yet what they had received was far beyond any imagination. Humans had faced storms, healed lands, taught the inhabitants, and guided life in ways no other species had managed. "They are not what we asked for," one elder said, "but perhaps they are exactly what was needed." Every step was a lesson, every action a demonstration of thought, care, and patience. For the first time in generations, the inhabitants of the planet seemed to understand that life could be resilient, not because it was forced, but because it was guided wisely. In the Central Valley, the humans gathered the planetary council and local inhabitants to show what they had accomplished. They had prepared a demonstration not of power, but of harmony. Using lightweight structures, flowing channels of water, and networks of growing plants, they illustrated how every part of the ecosystem could support another. Trees now guided streams with their roots, small animals interacted with plants that provided shelter and nourishment, and even the hills had been stabilized to allow safe passage for larger creatures. Everything was connected. A young alien with wide eyes full of wonder asked the human leader, "How did you do all of this? How could a few beings accomplish what our generations could not?" "It is about understanding, patience, and courage to act." They had shown that being monstrous in appearance did not make one dangerous. It could make one capable of extraordinary things. Over the following hours, humans led the inhabitants in practical exercises. Children practiced guiding streams, adults learned to plant trees strategically, and council members observed how small adjustments could prevent future floods or landslides. The humans encouraged creativity, showing that mistakes were part of learning and that curiosity could lead to solutions no one had imagined. Meanwhile, the forests continued to flourish. Trees that had been weak grew taller and stronger. Flowers spread across valleys in soft waves of color. Small animals moved confidently, and even the largest creatures began to explore new territories. The humans' guidance had created not just healing, but growth, an ecosystem that was self-sustaining, resilient, and capable of adapting to future challenges. At sunset, the humans gathered at the edge of a restored lake, its waters reflecting the orange and pink hues of the sky. They stood silently, observing the life around them. Birds nesting, fish swimming, children laughing, and the wind rustling through newly green forests. The aliens gathered nearby, their expressions a mix of admiration, gratitude, and awe. For the first time, they saw the humans not as strangers, not as monsters, but as something far greater, guardians of life, teachers of courage, and creators of hope. One of the council elders, a being of flowing light, floated forward. "You were not what we expected," it said, voice trembling with respect. "We asked for heavenly saviors, and instead you sent monsters. Yet these monsters have shown wisdom, patience, and courage beyond our imagining. You have saved this world, but more than that, you have taught us to see life differently. And now it is your turn to continue guiding this world with the lessons you have learned." The aliens began to work with renewed confidence, applying what they had observed and gradually taking more responsibility for maintaining balance. Meanwhile, humans began preparing to leave. Their mission had been long but successful. The planet was stronger, more resilient, and filled with life again. They had faced challenges, adapted to unexpected consequences, and guided every action with patience and understanding. And though they were towering and strange in appearance, their hearts and minds had earned the respect and trust of all who lived there. As their ships prepared to depart, children ran to the humans, hugging their legs, touching the suits, and waving goodbye. Adults followed, offering smiles and gestures of thanks. The humans knelt, waved, and encouraged everyone to keep learning, caring, and observing. "The world is yours to protect now," one said. "Remember to guide, not force, to watch, not ignore, to care always." Instead, they had received humans, bold, strange, unpredictable, and entirely remarkable. And in the months and years that followed, the inhabitants of the planet did not forget the lessons they had learned. They remembered how courage, creativity, patience, and care could heal even the most fragile world. The humans themselves looked back once before leaving the planet entirely. They saw forests thriving, rivers flowing, animals exploring freely, and children laughing with the joy of life renewed. They felt satisfaction, but no pride, only the quiet certainty that they had done what they could and that the seeds of hope had been planted. As they traveled back into space, they shared their experiences with one another. They discussed the lessons of the planet, the responses of the creatures and inhabitants, and the challenges they had faced. Every human in the team understood that their mission was more than restoration. It was teaching, inspiring, and showing that even beings who seemed monstrous could act with wisdom, care, and courage. Back on the planet, life continued to thrive. Streams flowed evenly, forests reached toward the sun, and the creatures moved confidently through the renewed landscape. The aliens who had once doubted humanity now spoke of them with reverence. They told stories of the towering beings who had arrived in strange suits, guiding life through storms and uncertainty, teaching lessons of patience and courage, and leaving the planet forever changed. The Council of Worlds recognized humanity as something entirely new in the galaxy. They were not angels, not serene beings of light. They were humans, bold, imaginative, patient, and compassionate. They acted with courage, solved problems creatively, and inspired life to grow in ways no other species could. And though they had left the planet, their influence remained, woven into every stream, tree, and creature, guiding life in a gentle, invisible hand. Children grew up hearing stories of the humans, remembering the kindness, wisdom, and daring of the towering monsters who had saved their world. They carried these lessons into adulthood, teaching others to observe, adapt, and care. Communities thrived, ecosystems stabilized, and the planet flourished. Humans had not only saved the planet, they had changed the way the inhabitants thought, acted, and dreamed. For the humans, the journey continued. Across the galaxy, other worlds sent signals for help, unaware that humans would arrive not as angels, but as bold, inventive, and compassionate beings. They carried with them the lessons of patience, courage, and creativity, the tools of life, not destruction. They were, in every sense, extraordinary. And as they moved toward the next world, they understood that being a savior was not about appearances, power, or expectation. It was about heart, mind, and the willingness to act with care in the face of uncertainty. And so humanity's legend began among the stars. They were the beings who arrived as monsters, who taught entire civilizations to hope, act, and grow, who faced storms and challenges with courage and intelligence, and who reminded the galaxy that true heroism was measured not by beauty or serenity, but by wisdom, patience, creativity, and the courage to care. The planets they touched remembered them not with fear, but with gratitude and inspiration. They were saviors in a new way, unexpected, bold, and extraordinary. And in that, humanity had become what no one had predicted, yet exactly what the universe needed. A reminder that hope, care, and courage could take even the most fragile world and make it thrive. The stars above shone brighter, as if recognizing the presence of beings who could change worlds, not with fear, but with heart. Humanity had arrived, and the galaxy would never forget them.